Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Podcasting Mastered. I'm Chelsea, and I'm here with Wade as always. And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year 2025. That's crazy.
Yes. And you know what else is crazy is the movie we're going to be talking about today.
Oh, God. Happy New Year, everybody. We're going to make everybody uncomfortable. That's what we're doing today. Yep.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So this is a movie that we kind of hinted at in our last episode, and I think that we are excited to cover this movie. So this movie we are talking about is...
a different person then.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Exactly. So we are talking about Nosferatu. This is the 2024 remake directed by Robert Eggers. Now, we actually covered the original, the 1922 version, way back in 2022 for its 100th birthday.
And we had to double check that because we thought we just did it maybe last year. No, it was a long time ago.
I know, yeah, time really flies for that, but that's really crazy because it's so cool to have this remake that came out in 2024, but also that this movie is over 100 years old, the original. If you haven't listened to our episode, you guys should definitely check it out. And especially if you're not even familiar with the original version, yeah, just give it a listen.
Was it episode 40, something like that?
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's titled Real Talk, Nosferatu Turns 100. So you can listen to that and then come back to this episode. Or if you want to just keep listening to this one, that's cool too. But we're going to be diving into this movie. Definitely talking a lot about the background of this movie, dealing more of some of the similarities, differences. I don't know how heavy we will dive into the story specifically because we definitely did that in our last episode on the original, and there are a lot of similarities because it actually is a remake, which I think when people hear remakes, they're like, another remake. That's all that movies are, just remakes, sequels. But then you have a movie like this that just...
It's a remake, but it's different. It's the same, but it's different.
Yeah, and I think it's something that's special about this because this is a movie that you should use as an example of what remakes should be.
Should be, yeah.
Should be, because like we said, this movie's the original is over 100 years old. Society has changed a lot since then. What people viewed as horror then is very different than it is today. And so just having this movie reimagined for modern day is really neat to see. And so, as I previously mentioned, that this movie was directed by Robert Eggers. Some people might be familiar with him. He's directed a couple movies that have gotten a lot of praise. They're very unique. They're very horror specific and also, in a sense, period pieces as well. So it kind of fits with Nosferatu. But some of the movies that you might be familiar with are The Lighthouse, The Northman, and The Witch. So I've seen The Lighthouse, so I was kind of like, oh boy, not sure what to expect from this one.
And I was just a lamb to slaughter. I haven't seen any of his 3 other movies, so I was like, yeah, let's do this. And I don't nope. Yep. I don't know if I need to watch his other movies.
No going back.
I don't think I can. No. Yeah. It's just it's not bad. I'm not saying that it's so hard to talk about my feelings while I was watching that movie because there was a lot of feelings.
No, for sure. This is definitely a movie and it's funny to talk about too because I think when we talked about the original, there's some really unique things that were done in this movie and that it had those horror-esque elements, but I think by today's standards it's not necessarily that scary. But then you have this remake where it just utilizes everything that's in modern day cinema today. The use of colors, lighting, sound is a big one because the original was a silent film. And so being able to heighten these sound effects, the score itself, which also is really interesting to get into the making of this movie as well. There's actually a really neat behind the scenes that was released on Peacock. It's 22 minutes. And it just kind of does a brief overview going into the making of this movie. It's definitely worth a watch. And I learned a couple things with that we'll share in this episode. But initially, just kind of recapping. So we keep talking on this movie, but if you're not familiar with what this story is, Nosferatu is essentially a vampire story. It is based off of Well, because the original was kind of it's a ripoff of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Yes. And it was heavily a ripoff, and that's why that movie's controversial. And so it's actually a big deal that there's even copies of that movie today, because it's kind of like a bootleg version of it.
Yeah, it wasn't like a fond retelling, or there wasn't like permission given or anything like that. It was just like, I like that, I'm taking that.
Yes.
And there was a lot of unhappy people about that.
But so then this remake version does specifically say it is based off of Nosferatu, as well as acknowledging it is based off of Dracula. So gives credit where credit's due, and it definitely pulls a lot from both. And it's really interesting the subtle changes that are made in this story, because essentially the story is a gothic tale about obsession, yes. Where an ancient vampire hunts and stalks a young woman, leaving untold horror in its wake.
That's a excellent, just kind of very fast summary, but also like doesn't tell you anything about the devastation.
No, of course,
that he brings. Like, holy cow.
Yeah, no, and it starts just like Nosferatu, the original, does as well, where we have our main couple. They're our main characters. It's Thomas and Ellen Hutter, and they're recently married, and Thomas's boss is like, I'm ready to give you a raise, and I have a special job just for you. I need you to travel very far away to Transylvania to get this property signed off. We have this rich count that wants to buy it, so good luck. Bye.
This man wants to buy a house, and you need to have him go sign the paper. See you later.
Yeah.
Simple
easy
as
enough.
that.
Yeah, exactly. So easy. But no.
Never is.
No, it never is. So that's what this one plays a lot more. This movie is a lot longer than the silent film is. This one's a little over 2 hours, so we definitely get a chance to expand the story, not just in general with our main characters, but with also our supporting characters and even some new additions.
I appreciated that too. I knew obviously things were going to be expanded upon because of the runtime, but like I appreciated that, because in the film, like the original, it's very focused on the two main characters and like their relationship with Count Orlok. And it's just like he goes there, he meets Orlok, he's very uncomfortable about the situation. He gets kind of like trapped there. Orlok ships himself across the world to get to wherever on Earth they're going, wherever in Germany, where his new house is. Thomas has to escape, get back, and then he kind of like saves his wife from Orlok, and then like that's the end of the movie. But in this, you see the effect of just like Orlok being in the area, like what happens to the rest of the city with Orlok simply being in their city, you know, like in Thomas's friends that are in it too, like the kind of side story situation going, like was bonkers.
Yes.
Like,
it really just adds to like, even more about who Count Orlok is, and especially we said specifically that devastation that he brings around, and because we get even more time just Thomas even getting to Count Orlok's place, and just like the people he meets along the way, and just being like, I don't know if you should go there. Like, there's weird crap going on. And he's kind of almost getting these like nightmares as he gets closer. And then especially when he is in the castle, that like he's trapped there essentially, and just the hallucinations. And you're kind of, as the viewer, kind of being like, okay, what's real, what's not? And there's hints of like what's actually real, what's not.
There's a lot of that, like altered reality going on. Like, holy cow.
There is. And then it's also really cool too, because in the silent film, we do see Count Orlok completely, just about right off the bat, like what he looks like. But this movie, we just see him in the shadows for so long, bits and pieces of him, his hand, parts of his face, and it just really is that extra step for this to add to the eeriness of what does he actually look like it, because it leaves more to your imagination to wonder, to, you know, kind of hold on to that fear that you might have while watching this.
But what you do get in this movie that you don't get in the last one is his voice.
Yes.
Which like, kudos to Bill Skarsgård and his ability to manipulate horror, you know, like on his own, you know. Did you see that? Like, like his voice, his Count Orlok voice, fantastic. Like,
yes.
just the feeling that hearing his voice for the first time gives you is like, oh god, and then you get to listen to it for another hour and a half, like, uh-oh. But did you know that, like, how he developed his Orlok voice?
It was something with like opera related.
Yeah, he worked with a singing coach to like adapt like this style, not just the accent, because the accent is very Transylvanian, it's very vampire, like you would kind of, but it just how he talks, like the enunciation of everything. He worked with a singing coach to do all of that stuff.
It's so wild because he really is unrecognizable in this role. I kept staring at him throughout this movie and I'm like, I just cannot really tell it's him. Like the prosthetics that were used, the amount of prosthetics that was used on him, the amount of detail they put into his look for Count Orlok, it's just incredible. And then yeah, with him completely transforming his voice.
You got to remember that this is the guy who played Pennywise too.
Yes.
With the new movies, which is just crazy. Like, although he did say that like this role as Nosferatu is probably like the hardest role that he's ever done, like to the point where like he himself is like, I'm good on horror. It was way
too evil for him. Like,
yeah, it was too much.
Yeah,
it was too much, which is crazy. Like comparing like Orlok to Pennywise and like who was more evil, you know? I don't know. That's crazy.
Yeah. But I think it's just in general with the atmosphere and everything and just the eeriness of everything. I can definitely understand, especially with like the craziness of the makeup. But giving a shout out, yes, to our count, we also have to talk about who our other cast is.
The rest of the cast.
Yeah, the rest of the cast. So I was not familiar with Lily Rose Depp, but she plays our lead Ellen, and she was amazing.
She was really good. In her like her horror chops too were crazy.
Yeah.
Some of the things that she had to do throughout the movie, dark, man.
Yeah. Well, and the documentary that I watched, it was saying that a lot of these movies, like, you know, types of horror movies, you'll see a lot of stuff that's CG with these characters and stuff, but like her writhing and like that was just purely her. Just like on screen, just doing all the, like, it's just crazy. But I was like, no, she's so good. Like, I would have never guessed who to pick for that role, but she just plays that role so well of just showing the pain, just the haunting things she goes for, but also that innocence too.
Well, and how her character was developed more in this movie. Because really, like, because in the original, doesn't like Thomas come back and basically just like saves her? Like they kill Orlok and like life is fine.
Well, I think she still dies though.
Does she still? I don't remember.
Yeah. But it's not as, like, intense. It's not this whole, like, romantic aspect in a sense to this, like, this obsession to the extreme that you get. Because you get more of this backstory, this connection, this interpretation of this relationship they have, this connection of, like, which is also really interesting, too. I kind of side note, branching off, but talking about how Orlok feeds in this is very different than typical vampire things that we see today. And Robert Eggers did interviews explaining why he chose this way instead of the quote traditional, what everybody's familiar with vampires. They think about people like biting the necks and feeding that way. But this one is this whole visceral, like in the chest thing. It's not really realistic to be able to do, but it's that close, like it's almost like this intimacy and also close to the heart. And
it's more like it's more intimate, more feral, more like
yes,
wild in a way, you know? Because anytime you don't see him feed very much, but when you see it, it's powerful and it just makes you like, it makes you want to turn away. Like, like you're seeing something you're not supposed to be seeing.
Yes, that is a great way to describe that. Yeah.
Especially like you see everybody that he feeds on in the movie too. It's like, oh, it really gets you.
Yes. But then our husband, Thomas, is played by Nicholas Hoult.
And you know, going into this movie, I didn't know who was in this movie besides Bill Skarsgård and Lily Rose Depp. So like the very first frame where it's like Nicholas Hoult, I was like, oh, I know that guy.
Yes.
I didn't know. I had no idea. But I like Nicholas Hoult, so it's fine.
Yes.
I was just like, oh, good. Like, oh, good. I recognize somebody. But, like, I recognized everybody. By the end of the movie, I was like, I've got everybody down. Like, they picked a good amount of people.
No, they really did. But, yeah. And Nicholas Hoult, I just like him in everything. Like, I'm just like, you go, dude. I'm ready for this. Or not at the same time, but yes.
Sometimes, yeah. He's such a mess. Like, he's a fun guy.
He's great, but yeah, he does a good job as playing the husband. And then we have the friends. Now, this was an interesting pairing, and it was also something where I was like, okay, well, first off, we have the main friend of Thomas, who's played by Aaron Tyler Johnson.
And again, I'm always happy to see Aaron Taylor Johnson on my screen. Like,
yeah,
I'm always like, yep, you can stay there. That's fine. So I didn't know, but it's just so funny because his voice it never matches his appearance.
It was wild.
And I've seen him in so many things, so you think I'd be over this by now, but I'm not ever going to be over it. Like, I need to go listen to him as Craven because it's going to crack me up.
Oh my gosh.
He still has the voice of like a 15-year-old. I love him so much. I'm not picking on him. I love it. It's just really funny because he's so like jacked and like perfectly handsome and stuff, and then like he has the voice and it's like, oh dude, come on.
No, Aaron Taylor Johnson, he definitely plays that role well in this. He's the really rich guy, inherited the money, the friend that's taking care of Ellen while Thomas is away, and he'll have no belief in any nonsense going on.
He'll have none of that.
No.
He'll have none of that.
No.
His wife is too pregnant for this. We gotta just live a normal life here, folks.
Oh my gosh, but it was wild about his wife. It was crazy to see her in another role that we have actually talked about the movie previously that she was also in.
I know. Well, like, okay, yeah. So his wife is played by Emma Corrin, who was Cassandra Nova in Deadpool and Wolverine, which is just like the difference between these two roles. Oh, good Lord. Like,
yeah.
The range on this. Because the wife is so, like, dainty and proper and just, like, chill. Like, you know, like, you'd think of, like, a period piece European wife, you know? Especially a rich one.
Yes.
She's so just, like, down to earth and relaxed and chill. And, like, Cassandra Nova is none of those things.
No. Well, another super big person that, you know, you immediately hear his voice, you see his face. You're like, oh boy, we're in for a ride, whatever movie he's in. That is the Willem Dafoe.
Willem Dafoe, which is so funny because, like, when I found out that he was going to be in this movie, like, not an hour before I watched it, like, on accident. I was on TikTok, and I was like, oh, crap. It's so funny because you hear everybody talking, and it's a period piece, and it's like, yeah. And then Willem Dafoe comes in, and he's like, yeah, I'm not doing that accent bullcrap.
He's an eccentric professor. He does what he wants to do.
Well, like, he talks like Willem Dafoe talks, but, like, with the vocabulary of a period piece. But it's like, these two things don't cross very well.
And it's pretty funny.
He made it work, but it was also just really funny.
Yeah. Well, I maybe he wasn't given much direction specifically with that accent. I don't know, because he has been in other Robert Eggers movies. One of them in particular is The Lighthouse, and the accent he has in that.
And you said there was quite one of one.
Yes.
There.
Yeah. Both him and Robert Pattinson have quite an accent, and definitely require subtitles for that. But that's for another time, or not at all. We'll talk about that movie. So. Anyway, but it's just crazy. It's a interesting cast that comes together for this movie. And I mean, this movie itself, like we said, it's being made for the modern audience. So we get a lot of things that we kind of see in horror movies. We like, especially when I mentioned the sound is such a big deal with this movie, like the score, just even the really silent moments.
Oh gosh, well, this is like, for a movie that's being remade off of a silent film, which I mean, that silent film wasn't silent very often, you know, because of the scoring and stuff. But this movie gets excellent use out of silence, and it's just like, you know, that, and which is also great because the silence also uses black and white a lot. This movie is like not quite half and half. But there's a lot of black and white in this movie, and it's really weird because, like, I feel like they used that black and white a lot when it felt like reality wasn't quite what it seemed to be. You know, it used it a lot to change the world around it, but that was often coupled with the silence as well, which just like the scene where Thomas is getting up to the castle and the horse-drawn carriage gets to him.
Oh, yes.
He's simply waiting for the carriage turns, and he gets in the carriage. But, like, with how those scenes were shot, the use of silence, the switch to black and white, And then, oh my
So
gosh,
eerie.
him
Yeah.
like getting into the carriage and that transition, like, oh my gosh, was so good.
Yes. It's like a lot of the black and white really, yeah, really plays into effect whenever like it's some type of influence or something related to Count Orlok.
Yes.
And it's really cool to see because I didn't really know actually because I tried not watching too much about the movie before seeing it because I just wanted to kind of like go and be like, I've
Oh
seen the
yeah.
original, I'm just ready to like just go into this remake and experience it for what it is. And so realizing that, yeah, part of it is in color and it's which is crazy to see, but then also the black and white, but also half the time it didn't even bother me. I was just like watching it and then I was like, oh yeah, I guess it is in black and white right now. How cool.
Well, there was lots of times where I couldn't tell if it was in
Mm,
black and white or color just because of how things were shot, you know? And it was
yeah.
like a thing where they were like, here's a scene, stare at it. And I'm like, and I'm looking, I'm like, and I'm just like, is that supposed to be black and white or is there just like a lack of color, you know?
Yeah.
There's a lot of that going on too, which it was just so funny because it was during, you know, there's again, like this camera's not changing. You're just kind of staring at something and nothing's really happening. They're just kind of like building up this anticipation or this tension, but you're just watching and it gives you something for your brain to catch on to, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, general talking about like the visual aspect of this movie and just how much technology has changed over the last 100+ years and just the detail put into not even just like with the camera, like having like very detailed stuff going on, but like
Mm-hmm.
the production design, the amount of elements that are put on screen for a very particular way. Robert Eggers talks about that he was very meticulous with this. A lot of his films in general are technically period pieces. He's really fascinated with that and dives like headfirst into trying to find the most authentic way to showcase how the set would look, or costumes is a big thing in this as well. He talks
A
about
very big thing.
how the costumes too, that like the friends are very wealthy and so they actually have more outfits compared to our leading couple because they're a little bit of lower status and they don't have quite as much money for an abundance of outfits, or their outfits might not be as pristine as the others. And it's really cool to see that based on those, because this movie actually is given a date. I don't remember the specific date, but it's the 1800s to help
18 like 39 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what pops up into my head.
Okay, yeah. I know it was definitely the 1800s, but just really trying to...
Oh, dang, 1838. I was really close.
Oh, wow, you were really close.
Dang it! Ugh!
So
Burn
close.
it down, start again.
But talking about with also just using modern day things, but also things that are older, is that this movie was also shot like essentially by candlelight. There's a millions, like hundreds of candles that are set up in a scene. And that's why we get that kind of like, which also helps the mood and the setting. But it's really cool that because sensors are so much stronger now in cameras, they're able to pick up all those little details in low light. But then just having a movie shot with candles is very different than just lights.
Yeah, well, that makes me think of the scene where Thomas meets Orlok for the first time, where they're in the table in front of the fireplace, this big roaring fireplace. But like, of course, the table is situated to where Orlok has his back to it. So you get a really good silhouette, but it's so rare that you get to see anything going on in front of him, and Thomas is there just like freaking out the whole time.
Yeah, you just get a lot of his reactions to everything.
Oh yeah, see plenty of him, yeah.
Yeah. And then, which was an interesting fact from the documentary I watched on Peacock, is that when they were doing like location scouting, they couldn't find quite the right castle or quite the right town for it. So they built huge sets. They built an entire street that is that town they live in. They built like all these rooms in the castle. They built the staircase leading up like that. It's pretty incredible. It's pretty awesome.
That's pretty crazy, yeah. It's Wicked all over again. Because they built all of their stuff. They built all their stuff from the ground up too, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's not as much green screen as you'd think.
No. And this one, yeah, definitely a lot of practical. And like we said, with the costume itself, with Orlok himself, the prosthetics that are used, the just also an interesting thing with the sound design of this is that they was talking about in the documentary about how like a lot of it is like a string orchestra used in this, and that there was also some experimental sounds going on where they had brought in this one lady who was experienced with rare horns and that like are not used today, or that are like really old and ancient, and so it was really funny listening to the different sounds they made, and I'm like, but it fits because it really like the music brings together bringing some of those eerie sounds with just everything going on.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because this movie today, I think if this movie did not have the sound, it would not be as impactful as it would be.
This is a full package movie. Like, you can't, you could not have this movie without the cast that it has. You could not have the movie without the soundtrack it has, without the cinematography it has, without anything. You can't take one element away and still have the same movie at all. At all. And that's great. Like, that's very strong.
Yeah.
Especially for a movie that came out on Christmas Day.
Exactly. Which I was wondering why this movie came out on Christmas Day. And then this movie like takes place around Christmas. It's a Christmas movie.
Yep. Terrifying. Yeah, whenever that poor lady was like, it's Christmas tide. And I was like, you're all dead. You're all dead.
And I went, oh my gosh, it's a Christmas movie.
If Die Hard is a Christmas movie, Nosferatu is too. Unfortunately for everybody.
Yes.
This one will not be making it into my annual Christmas movie list.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think this is a movie that's worth watching, but it is one that's hard to watch. And it's one that it would be very difficult to watch over and over again. It's just a cinematic experience that is
an experience is a word.
Yeah,
I do not regret going to watch it at all.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of that movie, we walked out of there and it was heavy. It was... not to like speak on the ending or anything, but like just wow, and it's so funny. Yeah, it is. Wow, that's a good word for it.
Yeah.
Like we got out and we sat in the lobby for like an hour because we had to wait on our second screening of the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
But just sitting there for an hour was like, oh my, like what do we do? Like we need to like shake this off.
Yeah.
Which is fine. It worked out because we did when we went to watch Nosferatu, we did a double screening and we sat through Nosferatu for 2.5 hours and then we went into Sonic 3. Which really helped.
Palate cleanser. Yes.
Palate cleanser. It really helped like liven the mood a little bit. And I was thinking about doing it the other way around. Nope. No. This was the right decision. Like we left the theater like 5 o'clock, so I felt a whole lot better when I left Sonic than when I did leaving Nosferatu. On purpose, too. It's not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. But, like, oof.
Yeah. Not every movie is going to just make you feel bright and cheery after you watch it. It doesn't make it a bad movie. It's just, it's a different experience, a different mindset going into films like these.
It was, I compared it to the double screening of Grave of the Fireflies and My Neighbor Totoro.
Just that whiplash. Yeah.
That whiplash, but that necessary whiplash.
Mm.
Like, if you haven't seen Grave of the Fireflies, I want to say go watch it, but like, don't go watch it. But if you have seen Grave of the Fireflies, you'll understand what leaving a movie like that is, and Nosferatu is that kind of movie.
Mm-hmm.
Where you don't have any ups in that movie at all. Like, there isn't any peace to be had within the film.
But worth a watch.
But worth a watch. Get that experience in and then go watch Sonic 3 afterwards, yes.
I think you're going to say, or Wicked, there you go.
Or Wicked, absolutely. Absolutely.
Or anything else, but yes. Any other thoughts about Nosferatu?
I think we covered a lot.
Yes. Yeah, and I know there's plenty that, we missed as well. We didn't do a play-by-play of the movie, but there's lots more you can compare.
I don't want to give that stuff away, though. That is not stuff to know. Like, on your way into the movie. You need to experience that yourself.
Yes. Although I did appreciate actually, like, being familiar enough with the original going into it.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of being like, oh, that makes sense of being an interpretation that way or that. But, and because if you're familiar with any type of, like, because it is based off Dracula as well, you can kind of get an idea. It's not about the predictability. It's about the journey. Like living in the moment in this movie and just seeing how it plays out.
Yes.
Okay. With those eerie notes, I think that'll do it for this week's episode. Listeners, thanks so much for sticking around with us. Let us know if you've seen this movie or if you're going to see it now. And be sure you follow or subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast so you don't miss out on future episodes. They won't be all this dark and dreary, but if you want them to be, just let us know and we'll add your suggestion to our list. But next up, we will be covering, maybe it will be a little bit of Dread in a sense, I don't know. We're going to be talking more X-Men. We're making our way through the very end of the Krakoan Age. We're finally getting there.
And down that hill we go.
Yes, exactly. But make sure you're following along to our podcast on social media, on YouTube, at Pod Demastered. And once again, thanks so much for listening to this week's episode, and we hope you tune in to the next one.
See ya.
See ya.